Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Shenanigans with Shreya podcast. Right now, we are in the FIFA World Cup of 2026. It is taking place across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. There are 48 nations that are competing in what is the biggest and the most expansive and essentially the most watched sporting event in the history of humankind, of human civilization. Literally billions of people, like more than half of the human population, are collectively tuning in to watch the World Cup. And I'm pretty sure even more people know about it just because it's so prevalent everywhere. This is the thing that I really wanted to discuss today because I was just curious. I was like, what is it about football? Like, why does a game where there are 22 people who are chasing this sphere, this ball across grass, possess this power to make entire nations so invested in their team, in the sport, make literal grown-ups or adults just like cry tears of joy or sadness or grief. And they unite as a country in a matter of seconds, which is really interesting and cool from a psychological perspective. So today's episode, I really wanted to talk about sports science, about cognitive psychology, and the neurobiology of the World Cup, which is a very interesting combination, I'm aware, but there has to be something about why this is such a big sport across the world, right? We are unpacking why our brains are kind of hardwired for this tribal unit fandom that tends to happen in cases of the World Cup, and how the World Cup acts like a time capsule in a way for us. You know, you remember which phase of life you were in the last World Cup and now this World Cup. And this is a pretty big event to be hosting for any country. And you can imagine that it does affect a country's economic infrastructure. Also, I want to talk a bit about the mindsets of icons within football like Messi, Ronaldo, like how their mindsets are. They're prominent figures within the football space. And most importantly, we are also going to extract some psychological tools that are used on the pitch, and we're going to break them down to see how we can actually inculcate them into our own lives for your career, for your exams, for just overall personal development. So let's start with the episode. Let's start with the cognitive science of why football is different, why it's so intoxicating for people when they're watching. So, there are other tournaments. It's not like football is the only sport on the planet. There's chess, there's swimming, there's, skiing. But a chess tournament or a swimming competition, they don't like literally have feral fans that like will collapse if a penalty is given. And a lot of this comes down to evolutionary biology. And there's this really interesting, highly specialized neural network that we're going to talk about. If you're watching a football match, especially if you're diehard fans of it, you aren't just observing it. Your brain is like running in real time. It's like a simulation of the game is happening in your head. And a lot of this is driven by this system called the mirror neuron system. So when, let's say, Mbappe cuts inside on his right foot, or when a defender throws their body in front of a ball, your mirror neurons fire as if you're actually in the game, like your muscles are contracting with the things happening on the pitch. Like you are experiencing the physical tension of the pitch inside your living room because you're so into the game. And when a goal is scored, there is this sociological and biological phenomena that is called the collective effervescence. So your brain experiences this instant surge of dopamine because, oh my God, yes, the reward has been achieved, and also adrenaline. And at the same time, whoever is rooting for the same team as you, there are millions of people in that same microsecond around the world that are experiencing that exact same chemical spike. And this mutual synchronization with everyone having, dopamine surges and adrenaline, it downregulates the amygdala, which is the fear center, and floods the body with endorphins, quite literally as if you were actually playing out there. So your body's flooded with endorphins. It creates this intense, happy tribal bond with complete strangers. Like if you were sitting in a pub and your team won, you're probably all going to be chatting about it like really, really animatedly or very happily. From an evolutionary perspective, human beings are tribal animals. We've had tribes for a very long time. And for over 200,000 years, our entire survival depended on defending our group and taking out the other group. So now, obviously, we're not in tribes and we don't have tribal wars, but we do channel that deep, primal, evolutionary, biological architecture into sports instead. So the World Cup is this safe simulation for evolutionary tribal warfare under the name of like football teams. So when your national team walks out onto the pitch, your brain is registering this as like, this is a direct representation of my survival, my tribe, my status. It is ancient biology operating on a very modern scale, a modern screen, really. And one of the most beautiful things about the World Cup is how it really alters your relationship with time and memory. This is what psychologists call the narrative anchoring effect. So if you think about your life right now, right, our brains aren't really the best at like remembering exactly what happened in chronological order, like year by year, but we are pretty good at remembering emotions that might have happened across the years, and we can track the phase of life that we were in based on the years of the World Cup. So if you look back at 2014, you might remember the school classroom that you were in when Germany won the World Cup. They beat Brazil. You look at 2018, you might remember who your friend group was and, you know, what your summer looked like and the brief background of possibly people watching FIFA football. And then if you look back at 2022, this is probably the most clearest because I remember this quite clearly. You might remember where you were when Argentina won the World Cup in Qatar, you know? I remember I was studying for my exams when I was in my undergrad, and I wasn't even following the match like that, but I was like, you know what, it's the final, I can watch the final. And I only watched like the second half of the match, and it was that point, you know, when Mbappe made 2 goals back to back within a span of like literally 90 seconds. And that was insane. Like everyone was like, whoa, like it felt special and electric just watching that, really. And yes, like I remember where I was, and I'm pretty sure most people do remember where they were at 2022. And now we are in 2026. And this is probably, again, something that you'll remember, that I'm watching the World Cup now, and this is not going to happen again for the next 4 years, but you'll remember where you were now. And because the World Cup happens every 4 years, it forces us to pause and look at the timeline of our lives. Now, obviously, our brains are more likely processing emotions with the World Cup or just memories of remembering where we were in specific years. The host countries that are actually hosting the World Cup, they're looking at really, really big numbers, guys. Because if you think about it, there is this economic psychology that happens when you're hosting a World Cup. There's a lot of massive debate in behavioral economics about whether hosting a World Cup is a blessing or a curse, because countries do spend like billions of dollars just building state-of-the-art facilities, these stadiums, these transport links and infrastructure. And obviously, you also have to upgrade your security. During the tournament, the host nation does experience a kind of obvious, massive influx of tourism, really, because the tourism, hospitality, and retail sectors quite literally skyrocket. There's so many people coming in to watch the match. They're going to have to stay somewhere. They're going to have to like experience the country as well. And this psychological phenomena here is called consumer euphoria. So when people are happy and emotionally validated by a sporting event, they're actually willing to spend more money, and that money increases by up to 15%, so 15%. A lot of economists often warn of this thing called the white elephant effect, where these massive high-tech stadiums just sit completely empty after the football tournament is over, after the circus leaves town, as to say. This costs millions in just maintenance then, and it's like, is it worth that much money just to maintain these amazingly ridiculous over-the-top stadiums that have been built just for like a few months or weeks of football? But essentially, hosting the World Cup isn't really like a direct ticket to immediate financial profit because the country's actually putting in so much going into it. It is, in a way, this long-term marketing strategy. You know, it is a nation that's spending billions to buy a permanent slot in just being remembered as the country that was the host of the FIFA World Cup. Now, it is kind of difficult to talk about football and the World Cup without actually talking about the icons who have rewritten the limits of human performance, who have emerged from the game, who have made these illustrious careers, but also really been inspiring in terms of human performance in a sport. At the performance of Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, through the lens of sports psychology. So there is this decade-long rivalry between Messi and Ronaldo, and in a way, it's an interesting psychological observation in the field of just motivation, really, because Cristiano Ronaldo, he has engineered himself into this athlete through a lot of obsessive discipline, which a lot of sports people tend to have. They're like quite obsessive with the way that they take care of their bodies, they work out. And Ronaldo's brain operates on this really hyper focused feedback loop where, you know, there's sleep optimization, there's rigid metabolic management, and a lot of relentless, agonizing practice. And Ronaldo really does prove that the human mind can override genetics or just flaws through a lot of systematic willpower, like just working so much. And with Messi, watching Messi play is a lesson in spatial intelligence and visual processing because Messi possesses a lot of extraordinary visual tracking speed. He tends not to look at just the players, but his brain actually calculates like the spaces between the bodies on the pitch. And then he enters this flow state where essentially his prefrontal cortex temporarily deactivates because he's not really thinking about these decisions. It's very second nature at this point. So the state is called transient hypofrontality. So again, he's not thinking, his body's just purely in the game. It's very instinctive because of how many years, basically his whole life, he's been playing football. And in a way, he's subconsciously an extension of the game at that point. Obviously, we are summarizing these icons, Messi, Ronaldo, that I've been thinking for a while. I do find it a bit odd that when we talk about football as this universal super event where billions of people are watching. We talk about the media, we talk about, again, the multi-billion-dollar sponsorships and just money being spent to build the infrastructure, and then the obsessive public attention. And when you think about it, it's overwhelmingly for the male football tournament. When I was thinking about this episode, I was like, what about the female part? Like, there is female football. Is there not female football tournament? I'm really confused as to why male football gets so much hype. You know what I mean? And we know so much about it just through like cultural osmosis. But what about female sports? Like, I literally don't know the name of a single female footballer. A lot of this disparity isn't because of athletic quality or of entertainment value. It's a reflection of our habituation. So from a behavioral psychology perspective, our brains are kind of lazy and we like what is familiar. This is called the mere exposure effect. So this is a psychological phenomena where humans develop a preference for things just because they're exposed to them repeatedly. So the truth about this is that for nearly a century, the infrastructure and the way that global broadcasting has worked, especially in the olden times in the 1900s when TVs had just come out, the major sport being broadcast at the time globally was men's football. And they had the primetime television slots, and the historic stadiums that were being built, and this massive corporate funding. And, the media also just really pushing male sports to the forefront for decades, which primed probably like our older generation's brain and also our own brain subconsciously to associate this peak adrenaline and dopamine with male sports, global prestige and celebration only with male athletes. It's amazing what can happen when you actually break that cycle. There are pretty record-breaking metrics of global viewership on the recent Women's World Cup, and also the fact that stadiums are actually selling out now for women leagues, and that data is luckily going in a good direction. Like, we don't care about gender anymore. We're looking at the game rather than which gender is playing it. Because, there's been performances from Aitana Bonmati or Lauren James, and the emotional tension or just the involvement in the game, the athletic performance, it's identical. So I feel like if you're watching one tournament, you should probably be watching the other one as well. Like, it's unfair to just watch the male sport version. When female sports are actually given the same production value, the same camera angles, the same actual care and scheduling and primetime TV slots as the men's tournaments, the audiences wouldn't care. Like, we're just watching it, but we're watching what we're being shown. And it is wild, like, still in 2026, really outdated that we still treat the men's tournament as the main quote unquote default. I really do think true sports science and true evolution just in our own mindsets requires us to actually recognize that, hey, world-class performances can actually belong to just the athlete. You know what I mean? So talking about world-class performances, let's have a look at the exact psychological principles off the pitch and figure out how we can actually inculcate them into our own daily lives. Like, how do you use the blueprints of the World Cup tournament to smash your exams, to handle career pressure, or, crush your personal goals? Here are some tips. When a football player misses an open goal or makes a really, dramatic, catastrophic mistake in front of this massive stadium, there's like 80,000 fans here, they really cannot afford to sit on the grass and be upset about it and overanalyze it, because if they lose their focus for even 5 seconds, their opposing team is going to attack them. Each team is constantly looking out for any sort of way in to get the football. There's a tool that players that mess up use called next play conditioning. So the idea is, how we can inculcate this in our lives essentially is the second you fail, whether it's, oh my God, I didn't know this exam question, or oops, I had a horrible presentation at work, or you're just having a terrible day in general, you can give yourself a few seconds, a minute or so, to acknowledge this frustration. And then you just mentally yell in your head, okay, next play, because you're switching into the next mode. You're kind of forcing your working memory back into the present moment because that's where life is happening. You can't let, quote unquote, your metaphorical opponents here get too much in your personal space. Elite midfielders also don't look at the entire pitch at once because that would cause a lot of just unnecessary cognitive overload, a lot of information. So they kind of chunk the pitch into micro zones. So when you're looking at this really massive career goal or exam syllabus that you need to study, stop looking at everything all at once because it's quite overwhelming. If you break it into chunks, you can break your next 24 hours down into micro matches. You can win the next 45 minutes of studying. You can take a halftime break. You can then win the next 45 minutes. So it's kind of like breaking down your massive goals into smaller ones to make them more digestible. And it gives you more room for actual success and prevents being overwhelmed by it. Now, before stepping onto a World Cup pitch, every single athlete executes this pre-match ritual. And it's not superstition, guys. It is neuropriming. So by doing the exact same warm-up, they're listening to the exact same music or tying their boots in the exact same way, they signal to their nervous system that it's time to enter peak performance mode. I actually watched a show recently where one of the characters was a captain of a team, and his entire show ritual is paying attention to what he did the day before he won a match. So in this case, it would be running around that same block, going to the exact same smoothie place, getting the exact same smoothie to drink, and then having the rest of the day like literally replicated as much as possible. And in a way, it's like you're putting yourself through the exact same set of steps, setting yourself up for success because, hey, last time I won this match, this time probably going to win again just because I'm mentally there. I've done the exact same routine as last time, So if you create a 5-minute, just a pre-work, pre-study ritual, clean your desk, put on the exact same instrumental track, take 2 deep breaths in and then start, you're going to train your brain to actually recognize, hey, the second that this music starts playing, this instrumental track starts playing, and the second I start taking deep breaths, that's when I am going to lock in onto my routine because that's the kind of starting signal of me locking in. And then you kind of subconsciously do that. So the World Cup is just a lot more than just a sports tournament. It very much affects human emotion and evolutionary biology, and there's a lot of mental resilience that we can learn from. And it really does remind us that we have a big capacity to just connect and push past so many limits, especially in sports. You can see that they do some crazy records out there. It's really monumental. And as you watch the rest of the matches throughout this historic 2026 tournament, don't just watch the scoreboard. It's fun to watch the psychology, watch the body language of the managers, the players, how focused they are, the unification of the crowd. And remember, you have the exact same machinery in your own head. You are entirely capable of achieving your own goals and winning your own personal World Cups. So anyways, we've come to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you did enjoy, do share with a football friend, give us a review on Spotify, leave a comment below. We love to hear from you. And enjoy watching the FIFA World Cup. I will see you in the next one. Bye.